Throughout history, almost every nation in the world has experienced a revolution. A revolution can be simply defined as a change. When a country undergoes a revolution, its ideals that it once believed in are being transformed. Revolutions are distinguished by differences in process as well as outcomes. By separating revolutionary processes into distinct components, we can distinguish the sequence and combination in which particular components appear. The island of Cuba was inhabited by numerous tribes prior to its discovery by the Spanish explorer Christopher Columbus in 1492. After Columbus's arrival, Cuba became a Spanish colony ruled by a Spanish governor. Increased tensions between Spain and the United States led to a Spanish withdrawal in 1898, and in 1902, Cuba gained formal independence. In the following years, the Cuban Republic saw significant economic development, but also political corruption. A series of oppressive leaders were governing, and in 1953, a movement to overthrow the tyrannical dictator Fulgencio Batista began. In the book Revolutions by Jack A. Goldstone, he identifies 12 stages that constitute revolutionary processes. The first 3 stages are the initiating phase, or the actual revolutionary episode. The first 3 stages consist of when some of the social classes manifest their discontent to the policies of the regime through demonstrations and protests. The elite, however, take no interest in acting upon this discontent, and the protests become suppressed. The elite's participation is necessary to organize a mass mobilization capable of bringing down a regime. In terms of Cuba, the national wealth was not equally distributed, with extremes of poverty and wealth. The Cuban middle classes were frustrated with their lack of political power and influence, which created tension between many Cuban workers and the government. The opposition against Bautista increased, and groups started to form in protest against the government. These groups were mainly composed of young students. In response to the uprising, Batista placed harsh punishments on any strikes or anti-government rallies, and even sent government troops to kill the leaders of the rebel groups. The violent and ruthless retaliation of the government created even more tension between the Batista government and the people of Cuba. The fourth step, as explained by Goldstone, is a sudden change in the initial regime. The rulers overestimate their hold on the people and believe that they have the situation under control. However, when the realization comes to that the opposition has the upper hand, it is often too late for the ruler to suppress it. In the case of Cuba, this sudden change occurred when one major rebel group led and founded by Fidel Castro, called the July 26 Movement, gained large support in cities and assembled arson attacks and bombings in protest against the Batista government. The rise of Fidel Castro's rebellion had a profound effect on Cuban society. It resulted in the polarization of society, civil war, and the overthrow of Batista. These occurrences can be explained by steps 5, 6, and 7 as defined by Goldstone. In June 1955, in Mexico, Fidel met the Argentinian revolutionary Ernesto Che Guevara, who joined his cause. They returned to Cuba on December 2, 1956, carrying Fidel Castro and 80 others of the 26th of July movement. 3 days after the trek began, Batista's army attacked and killed most of the revolutionaries. A few men escaped into the Sierra Maestra Mountains. The Union of Che could be considered the 8th step in a revolution by Goldstone's definition. Although no international war occurred, an addition of revolutionaries from around the world did happen. After a lot of war and bloodshed, the mountains came under Castro's control. Although Castro's forces remained quite small in numbers, usually fewer than 200 men, while the Cuban army and police force had a manpower over 37,000. The army was forced to retreat. An arms embargo imposed on the Cuban government by the United States on March 14, 1958, contributed significantly to the weakness of Batista's forces. This is considered Phase 9, as defined by Goldstone, Steps to Revolution. The last three phases, as defined by Goldstone, deal with the moderation back into dealing with the aftermath of all the events that took place. In the case of the Cuban Revolution, the revolution ended in success on January 1, 1959, when Batista was finally ousted. Castro replaced the government with a revolutionary, communist one. As Castro's group continued to increase and began to take over, Batista's panic rose. He fled to the Dominican Republic on January 1, 1959. This action became known as the overthrow of Batista, as well as the end of the Cuban Revolution. Everything changed after the end of the Cuban Revolution. Batista's soldiers, policemen, and agents were tried and executed. Manuel Urrutia Leo became president, and Jose Miro Cardona became prime minister. Castro became the commander-in-chief, but when Cardona resigned the next month, Castro became the prime minister. The Cuban Revolution was not a revolt that was completed in one day, nor was it the result of one key event. Closely following the 12 steps to revolution as defined by Goldstone, the Cuban Revolution unseated the bourgeoisie himself and removed him from his role as the ruling class. It transformed the corrupt government into a communist government led by Fidel Castro.